Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll start with this. What is the recent addition of Tina Rupprecht to the newly updated Ring IQ Women's Pound for Pound list, and how this fighter, this two-division champion, is really only one belt away, one fight away from becoming the inaugural undisputed atomweight champion in the four-belt era. Before, I don't think there ever was one, so she would be the first.
History to be made.
And all she's got to do is take on Japan's own Sumire Yamanaka, sports professional record of 8 wins with no losses, no draws, 3 knockouts, a considerably less experienced fighter than Tina Rupprecht is, if and when that fight gets made, and I think it's going to next year.
Tina wins.
I think she does. Interesting tidbits in association with this match is that Sumire was actually supposed to be boxing on the undercard of Tina's last fight against former champion Fabiana Batiki.
The fight fell through because Fabiana collapsed at the weigh-in the day before the fight, so the fight between them was called off, and Sumire was allowed to reign as a champion a while longer.
Sumire was probably going to lose that fight to Fabiana, which would have set up an undisputed rematch between Tina Rupprecht and Fabiana Batiki, as they have fought before. They fought earlier this year in January, and Tina beat Fabiana for the WBC title,
kicking off this undisputed run.
Following it up by taking on Eri Matsuda, unified champion Eri Matsuda, leaving Tina with only one more belt to collect, one more to finish the set.
She can do it.
Took me a while to make these updates, as there was no U.S. broadcast partner for Tina Rupprecht's fight. All I knew about the fight was that she won. She won. She kept up her end of the bargain, and she's unified champion now.
She's got to do is beat Samura.
Samura, who has the last brass ring at 8-0, but her quality of competition, at least compared to Tina's, is largely pedestrian. These are mostly local girls.
Samura herself has only fought in a 10-rounder once, just once, as a professional.
Tina's gonna beat her, and when she does, it'll be that much harder for the fighters ranked behind her to move past her. She already reigned for a number of years as a champion in the minimum weight division from 2018 to 2023, several successful title defenses. Currently, she's at atomweight.
She beat 2 champions there.
Tack on that she beat at least one fighter that's ranked on this list in 3-division champion Yo Costavalle, who's very accomplished herself. That's a victory that's aging well for Tina Rupprecht. Maybe we see a rematch down the line?
Maybe.
Tina is a fighter that goes largely unnoticed here in America, as coverage for women's boxing is still sparse. They're always talking about the same couple of fighters, the same usual names.
Same pool.
It kind of defeats the purpose of the list, since upon its inception, just the modern concept of pound-for-pound list all derives from high-quality fighters at the lower weights that are perhaps not as popular as their heavier contemporaries, but are still very skilled.
The list is intended to shed light upon them, acknowledge them.
So that when all the popular periodicals are doing with their versions of a pound-for-pound list is acknowledging the same fighters everybody already knows because they're too lazy to do the legwork,
well, then it defeats the purpose.
Tina is definitely one of the best, whether the casual audience is aware of it or not.
The Germans might be.
I saw that after her big win, she was making the rounds on one of those morning shows over there. It's been a good year for women in boxing, at least in Germany. Nina Menke became IBF champion at featherweight. Tina Rupprecht has become a champion, a unified champion at atomweight very soon. Sarah Borman,
she might become the WBO minimum weight champion.
The Germans, as it were, may have 3 reigning champions and 1 undisputed very soon. The way I think this is gonna go Tina will challenge Sumaire at some point in the first or second quarter of next year for the title she has. She'll beat her, and then she might shift her focus over to a Yokasta-Valle rematch. She's not actually the one that needs it.
Yokasta does, because Tina won the first one.
When you survey the landscape, this really would be the best fight to make anywhere at or around these weights. Surveying the landscape, Tina is head and shoulders above the other atomweights, and the same is true for Yokasta at minimum.
The fight between them is the best fight to make anywhere at or around these weights.
Yokasta-Valle had her heart set on a Senicia Estrada rematch, but Senicia went up and retired. She wasn't able to get her lick back. She might be able to with Tina Rupprecht.
Unbeknownst to most, there was some effort in previous years to get these two back in the ring with each other. That all fell apart circa 2020 when the pandemic hit and everything got shut down.
4 to 5 years later, there is still hope that the second fight might see the light of day, as these really are the two best fighters anywhere at or around these weights, and they do have unfinished business.
So we'll see. I expect that Tina will complete the set early next year, become undisputed at Atom, then maybe move back up to minimum and fight Yokasta for a second time.
So Ariel, keep your mouth shut, because you don't know about the Cobra's career.
That people are saying that he is mad at me, that he told me to keep my mouth shut.
And Ariel, he's just showing his limited knowledge for professional boxing. He's an MMA commentator or MMA journalist. He should stick to MMA.
And then you have Carl Froch begging for it. You have Tony Bellew.
She finally got into the realm of real fights that I want to see him fight.
Okay,
Tony Bellew, Carl Froch, Andre Ward.
Can I tell you something right now? Tony Bellew, and I like Tony a lot. One side of his mouth says, this is a sham. Other side of his mouth took a payday to fly from the UK to Texas to sit there for 1 minute of camera time. So you have to at least acknowledge that you are all trying to take from him. And the other thing is, much love, Tony, much love. He was sitting there. I was doing the press conference. Not a soul knew who he was.
You know, I never heard it put that way until Ariel said it. That Tony spent all that money to fly out there to get 1 minute of camera time.
To say something to Jake Paul that he could have easily said via social media.
X, Instagram.
Point is,
How dare they?
Tony Bellew versus Carl Froch does nothing, or Carl Froch do nothing in America.
Okay.
Come on. Carl Froch.
So that's Ariel just talking absolute bollocks about the Cobra, looking for a payday, and people saying, who's Carl Froch?
Ariel's not off base. As accomplished as Carl Froch is, a Hall of Fame inductee, and very well known in his own neck of the woods here, people would sooner confuse him for Jude Law
Ian McGregor.
than a professional boxer. He's just not that well known here. He's a celebrity in the UK, but not in America.
If I fought Jake Paul in America, it'd be massive, because everyone would think, Jake Paul's about to get ironed out by the Cobra.
Well, the only time I mentioned Carl Froch was when I said that in America, he's just not as well known as an American fighter of the people that Jake Paul is fighting right now.
We probably are going to see Jake Paul in the ring again, because look at the attention he gets. Look at the crowds he draws. Look at Netflix. Apparently there was 30 million people watching that fight. So that's the biggest boxing match this year. All you've got left is somebody like me. He'd mentioned me before, and there'll be people out there saying, oh, Carl Froch's talking about himself. He's after a payday. Listen, I'm not after a payday. I'm doing all right. There's no problems with my finances. But I'll take the payday, of course I will. And I'll end Jake Paul with 1 punt.
Here's the thing: there's a bunch of people who do the gimmick of like, Jake Paul, you suck. You're a disgrace. You're a schmuck. You're ruining boxing. All this stuff and more. But please pick me.
Once again, Ariel Helwani is spot on the money. And I've never heard it put that way, but that puts it in perspective. That you're only dignifying Jake with a response. You're only dignifying his presence in the sport by pursuing him. If what you want him to do is go away, then stop paying him attention.
Give me the lottery ticket. I'll beat you with one hand behind my back. So you do the thing where like you're above it and you would never lower yourself, but then you're saying, please, please, please give me the chance to shut you up, and I'll do it for $100 million with one hand behind my back and both my legs tied. So like, we know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the payday. I get it, but just be honest about it.
I'd go in there one-armed and beat this guy. He can't box.
We know, Carl. We don't need you to tell us that.
Just like you don't need us to tell you that you're too experienced for Jake. You know that.
And too able-bodied.
You know that.
He's absolutely useless.
Carl Froch versus Jake Paul is a nothing burger fight here in the United States. Do you guys disagree?
No, I agree.
Nothing burger. People will be like, who? What? There's a difference between, British boxing, domestic dust-ups, if you will, and global boxing.
I don't know where the from, but you don't know anything about boxing. I think you stick to MMA journalism.
He's not wrong, though. Jake Paul versus Carl Froch in America? That doesn't move the needle. Now, Jake Paul versus Carl Froch in the UK? That would, but why would Jake fight you in the UK?
So that you actually have something to bring to the table?
Because in America, you ain't got no marquee value.
Your boxing knowledge is obviously flawed and limited. You ain't got a clue.
So I think he's upset that I said that maybe in America, 80 or so thousand people supposedly may have seen him fight against Groves back in the day at Wembley Stadium. But, here in America, he probably doesn't sell out Hammerstein Ballroom. And that's not a shot. It's just some people. No, that's just some people are big in the UK and some people are big in America.
He's absolutely right about that. Chris Eubank Jr., for example, is worth a pretty penny in the United Kingdom because of his surname. But here in America,
It's just a bald Trevor Noah with a tattooed hairline.
perfect example of what Ariel is talking about, that yes, some guys are big in some parts of the world, but not so big in others. There's no shame in that.
Carl's ego can't handle it.
Absolute nonsense. Really exposing his knowledge, his limited knowledge for the professional boxing world. About boxing, mate. Go on, piss off.
Carl, we'll fly you into New York. You come here in studio. We'll debate whether or not Carl Froch versus Jake Paul puts more butts in seats than KSI versus Jake,
It doesn't.
or Jake Tommy 2.
Stay in your lane and stay out of professional boxing because it's just pathetic.
Carl's ego took a hit at the proposition that his name just ain't big enough, ain't worth enough for a Jake Paul fight. Not in America. Maybe if Jake wanted to do something in the UK, that would be different. But for boxing in the UK, he could just run it back with Tommy.
Do a rematch.
But do that big fight, that really big fight with another social media influencer like himself in KSI. That would be many times bigger than a Carl Froch fight for Jake, as KSI's audience is not limited to a boxing fan, kids who are into boxing. He's a social media influencer, just like Jake.
And why should Carl Froch's ego be attached to a Jake Paul fight anyway?
What Carl Froch represents is an era where the American boxing fan was actually a lot more xenophobic than they are now. Carl did his best work in the super middleweight division, which at that time was seen largely as a European division full of European guys, with the exception of Andre Ward, who never had a big following in America.
Now, these are both great fighters. I'm not taking away from their legacies or their ability to fight, but, Carl wasn't that well known in America, and Andre
Ward was living in the shadow of the bigger names at the time. That's Floyd Mayweather, that's Manny Pacquiao, Miguel Cotto,
Canelo.
Shane Mosley, that there were other boxers boxing at the time that Andre was doing his thing at super middleweight that had a better grasp on the American populace's attention, the American boxing fan, that they don't really follow Andre that much less the guy that he beat in Carl Froch.
Sorry.
Juan Manuel Marquez, Antonio Margarito, Timothy Bradley.
It's a reality check.
That when you present yourself as a potential opponent option for a Jake Paul to do a fight in America, sorry, buddy, but your name just isn't big enough. Not around here, and why should your ego be attached to that anyway? I mean, that reveals what your true intentions are. Why should you care that much?
All this pseudo-altruism.
Because you're the one that's going to save boxing by ridding it of Jake Paul. You're one of many, buddy. A lot of current and former fighters that are now piping up, lining up for a Jake Paul payday. Some who have belts. And the only one who was honest about it was Kevin Lerena, South Africa's Kevin Lerena, reigning bridgerweight champion.
He said he wants to fight him for the money.
He didn't pass himself off as boxing's savior or some outraged spectator, some outraged current or former fighter. He wants to fight Jake for the payday, for the money.
Because boxing needs saving from Jake Paul? Why? What did Jake do?
When Jake started out in the boxing world, he started off boxing novices, like himself.
Yeah.
Other social media influencers and maybe guys from different sports But what's wrong with that?
How is that hurting boxing?
Builds himself up a little bit, starts boxing retired MMA fighters. But I reiterate, how is that hurting boxing? Why is it wrong when Jake Paul does it, but it's not wrong when Floyd Mayweather does it? Because he did it first, with Conor McGregor.
Oh, now it bothers you?
It's okay when Floyd Mayweather does it, but when a novice boxer, a young guy who really has no background in boxing, when he does it, oh, now it's wrong? Now it's hurting the sport?
Bullshit.
It's the boxers who set the tone.
They did.
It's the boxers themselves who set the precedent for this. And every single one of them that pipes up saying they want a Jake Paul fight only dignify his presence. They only dignify him with a response, reacting to whatever he's doing. Why should you care?
Some of you guys are Hall of Fame inductees, what are supposed to be esteemed professionals and reigning champions, pound for pound alums.
You misrepresent what your intentions really are because you don't want to appear as big an opportunist as Jake. You want to point the finger at him.
Stones in a glass house.
Say that it's wrong for him to box these MMA fighters and retirees.
But it's not wrong for you to go after him. It's not wrong for somebody as experienced as you are to go after him. Oh, that's not wrong.
Because these circus fights are somehow anathema to the integrity of boxing. The integrity?
This is not about integrity. This is about money.
Bunch of guys as experienced as Carl Froch, Tony Bellew, and Tony Otava are to a better beef.
Daniel Dubois.
Wanting to fight the likes of a Jake Paul, that's just as, if not more exploitative than what he's doing, than what you guys claim he's doing, because he's just boxing other novices most of the time.
They think he took advantage of Mike Tyson.
Because of Mike Tyson's old age, because this guy would have never stood a chance against Mike in his prime. I don't look at that as taking advantage of Mike because Mike got paid. Mike got something like $20 million.
He's a grown man. He signed the waiver.
It's not even that I was entertained by that spectacle, because I wasn't. And the only reason I watched that show was actually for Katie and Amanda, all the same. Nobody was taken advantage of there.
People taken advantage of is not why you want to go after this kid. You want to cash in on his fan base. That's what it is. Because he, unlike many boxers, came into the sport with a built-in fan base that he amassed on social media.
You want to exploit that, pass it off as virtue, altruism. This is about the integrity of boxing.
Jake is not the bad guy.
I don't know him. I don't know that kid from Adam. But what I do know is he's holding up a mirror.
Said it in my previous video. Jake Paul is to boxing what the Joker is to Gotham.
A byproduct of its people and a consequence of their practices.
You built this monster.
If boxing actually had any integrity, so many esteemed professionals wouldn't be lining up to win the sweepstakes.
You would just ignore him.
You wouldn't dignify him, legitimize him by calling him out, because who is he that somebody like you should be calling him out?
Ariel Helwani hit the nail on the head.
Jake is not the bad guy in all of this, as strange as that might sound. No, he's not the bad guy, he's the byproduct. He's the consequence of a sport that doesn't take itself seriously most of the time.
A sport that doesn't have much integrity most of the time.
What he's doing is not so dissimilar from what esteemed professionals in the sport do on a regular basis. You're just mad he's making more money than you guys are doing it.
Welcome to capitalism.
The bottom line is, when a guy like Carl Froch calls out Jake Paul, we see what it is. We see right through you.
You just want to get paid.